Listen closely. Do you hear it? That persistent scratching inside your chest, like a rat trapped between walls, gnawing at the insulation of your sanity. That's desire, my friend. That's the sound of your own weakness feasting on itself. I once knew a man who collected dead butterflies, pressed them between glass plates, labeled each one with the date he found them. "They're more beautiful this way," he'd say, running his fingers over the cases. "Perfect, unchanging, mine." He died alone in that apartment, surrounded by 10,000 frozen wings that never learned to fly away from him. The neighbors found him 3 weeks later. The butterflies, of course, remained perfectly preserved. That's what craving does to a man. It's formaldehyde for the soul. You see her everywhere, don't you? In the curve of a stranger's shoulder blade. In the particular way morning light hits a coffee cup. Your mind has become a projector, and she is every film reel, playing on loop until the edges burn and curl. Schopenhauer called it the porcupine's dilemma. We seek warmth from others, but their quills pierce us when we get too close. Yet here you are, embracing the porcupine until you're more wound than man. The ancient Greeks had a word, pothos, the desire for something absent, something that may have never existed at all. They carved it into marble as a young man reaching for clouds. Even stone knew better than to grasp at vapor. But let me tell you what the philosophers won't, what they're too polite to whisper across their dusty pages. Your craving isn't about her. It never was. She's just the mirror you've chosen to reflect your own emptiness back at you. And my God, how you love the show. You're addicted to the ache because at least it makes you feel something in this anesthetized world where we scroll through existence like tourists in our own lives. There's a village in Eastern Europe where they tell children about the rusalka, the spirit of a woman who drowned herself for love. She waits in the water, beautiful and beckoning, singing songs that make men forget their names. Those who follow her voice never surface again. The villagers say you can still hear them sometimes, on foggy mornings, singing along from beneath the waves. Content, finally. Drowned, but content. Modern psychology dressed this up in prettier clothes. A 2024 study from Copenhagen found that men who reported obsessive romantic ideation showed increased activity in the same neural pathways as those suffering from addiction. The brain, it seems, can't tell the difference between heroin and her absence. Both create the same sweet destruction, the same savage need for one more hit, one more text, one more glimpse of her silhouette in someone else's summer dress. Here's what Machiavelli knew, but wrapped in political metaphor. Power lies in indifference. The prince who needs his subjects' love is already dethroned. The man who craves her approval has already knelt. You've handed her a remote control to your happiness and act surprised when she changes the channel. But I'll tell you a secret darker still. She doesn't want this power. Nobody does. It's exhausting being someone's oxygen. She feels your need like humidity before a storm, thick and suffocating. Your desire has teeth, and she's tired of being bitten by your hunger. The Buddhists have a teaching about hungry ghosts, beings with enormous stomachs but tiny mouths, cursed to eternal craving they can never satisfy. They wander the earth, these grotesque spirits, trying to fill a void that expands with each swallow. Tell me, when you lie awake at 3 a.m., phone in hand, hovering over her name, don't you feel that pinhole mouth, that cosmic belly? Last week, I watched a moth circle a candle flame for 3 hours. It would approach, singe its wings, retreat, then return. Approach, burn, retreat, return. I fell asleep watching. When I woke, the candle had burned out, and the moth lay beside it, finally still. I couldn't tell if it had died from the flame or from the darkness that followed. So here's my question for you, whispered like a serpent's proposition. What would happen if you simply stopped? What if you didn't text back? What if you deleted her number? What if you treated your desire like what it really is, a chemical hijacking, a biological con game, your DNA's desperate attempt to trick you into perpetuating itself? What if you became the man who doesn't need? Because here's the cosmic joke, the punchline that makes angels weep. The moment you stop craving her is the moment you become worth craving, but by then, oh by then, you won't care. You're the curator of memories that never happened, polishing exhibits of imaginary tomorrows. There's a room in your mind where she still loves you. You've furnished it beautifully. Velvet curtains that smell like her perfume, photographs of vacations you never took, a kitchen where you cook breakfast together every Sunday while rain taps Morse code confessions on the window. You visit this room daily, hourly, constantly. You've worn grooves in the floorboards from pacing its familiar corners. Welcome to your museum of never was. In Prague, there's an actual museum of broken relationships. People send in artifacts from their failed loves. A wedding dress never worn, a toaster that made breakfast for two, a prosthetic leg left behind in fury. Each object comes with a story, a small placard explaining its significance. The curator told me once, over wine that tasted like regret. The fascinating thing is how many people send us items from relationships that barely existed. 3 dates, 2 weeks, a single kiss. But look at the essays they write. Novels about empires that were only ever sketches in sand. You know what Kierkegaard said about this? He called it the sickness unto death. Not physical death, but the slow spiritual asphyxiation of living in possibility instead of reality. You're drowning in what-ifs while the what-is walks past you every day, unnoticed, unnamed, unborn. I'll paint you a picture. A man sits in a restaurant alone, but he's set the table for two. He orders her favorite wine, Malbec, 2018, notes of blackberry and smoke. He conducts entire conversations with the empty chair, laughing at jokes she never tells, reaching across to touch a hand that isn't there. The waitstaff have seen this before. They call them ghost dates, and they happen more often than you'd think. One waiter told me, the saddest part isn't the aloneness, it's how happy they look, talking to nothing. Your mind has become a master forger, crafting memories with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. That time she almost said she loved you, except she didn't. That look she gave you that meant everything, except it meant nothing. You're a time traveler, but your machine only moves between a past that never was and a future that never will be. A 2025 neurological study from Tokyo revealed something delicious. Our brains literally cannot distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and real memories. The same neurons fire, the same chemicals release. You can get addicted to daydreams the way others get addicted to methamphetamines, and you, my friend, are mainlining fantasy. The ancient Egyptians believed that speaking someone's name kept them alive in the afterlife. Every utterance was a resurrection. But what happens when you speak the name of something that never lived? What mongrel spirit are you summoning from the void? Here's where it gets grotesque. You're not even in love with her anymore. You're in love with your projection of her, this hologram you've constructed from selective memories and willful blindness. The real her, the one who checks her phone while you're talking, who forgets your birthday, who chose someone else. She's been edited out of your mental screenplay. You've created a goddess from spare parts and worship at an altar of your own construction. Nietzsche would laugh at you. He'd say you're the last man, the comfortable man, too weak to face the abyss of what actually is. So you paint pretty pictures on the darkness. You've chosen the blue pill not once but every morning, washing it down with the bitter coffee of self-deception. Let me tell you about the Japanese concept of tsukumogami, objects that acquire souls after existing for 100 years. But your imaginary relationship has aged in dog years, hasn't it? 7 imaginary years for every real month. By now, your fantasy has developed consciousness, demands, its own appetite. It feeds on you, and you mistake the eating for love. There's a man in Berlin who builds doll houses, perfect replicas of homes that don't exist. He told me, I build the houses I'll never live in, for the family I'll never have. But inside these walls, I'm happy. Isn't that enough? I didn't have the heart to tell him about the dust gathering in the corners, the way miniature furniture can never hold the weight of a real life. You're writing love letters to a ghost, my friend. Every text you draft and delete, every song that reminds you of her, every time you drive past her street, you're adding another artifact to your museum. Soon you'll have a whole wing dedicated to conversations you should have had, arguments you would have won, apologies that might have fixed everything. But museums are for dead things. So let me ask you something, and I want you to feel this question like ice water in your veins. What are you so afraid of in the real world that you prefer this mausoleum of maybe? What terror lurks in accepting that she's gone, that she was never yours, that your love story is actually just a story you've been telling yourself to avoid writing a new one? What would happen if you locked this museum, threw away the key, and walked into the terrible, beautiful uncertainty of now? Because outside your museum, real women are laughing real laughs, crying real tears, living real lives. But you can't see them through the fogged windows of your past that wasn't. The most exquisite torture isn't losing someone you love. It's losing someone you never had, mourning a funeral for someone who was never born, being homesick for a place you've never been. Welcome to your museum. Admission is free, but the cost is everything. Every no is a philosopher's stone, transmuting lead desperation into golden indifference. Pull up a chair. Let me tell you about the gift she gave you when she walked away. The treasure wrapped in thorns. The medicine that tastes like poison but cures a disease you didn't know you had. In medieval times, alchemists spent lifetimes searching for the philosopher's stone, that mythical substance that could turn base metals into gold. They died in laboratories full of mercury vapor and broken dreams, never realizing the transformation they sought was metaphorical. The real alchemy. It happens when a woman's rejection burns away everything false in you, leaving only what cannot be destroyed. I knew a sculptor once who worked exclusively with rejected marble, blocks other artists had abandoned, deemed too flawed, too veined with imperfection. "The stone already knows what it wants to be," he'd say, chisels singing against limestone. "My job is just to remove everything that isn't essential." His studio was full of half-emerged figures, beautiful precisely because of their cracks, their irregular grain, their refusedness. That's what her no is doing to you, whether you realize it or not. It's chiseling away the needy boy, the performer, the beggar prince, who thought love was something you earned by being good enough, funny enough, successful enough. Every unreturned text is a strike of the hammer. Every "let's just be friends" is the rasp of sandpaper on your rough edges. The Stoics had a practice called premeditatio malorum, imagining loss before it happens so it loses its power to destroy you. But you're living in post-meditatio malorum. The loss has happened, and now you get to discover what remains when everything you thought you needed is gone. Here's what Schopenhauer understood that Instagram philosophers don't. Suffering isn't a bug in the human condition. It's the feature. It's the gravity that gives weight to joy, the darkness that makes light visible. Without her rejection, you'd still be that insufferable optimist, that walking Hallmark card convinced that love conquers all. Now you know better. Now you know that love conquers nothing, that it's just another force in the universe, like entropy or radiation, powerful, indifferent, occasionally lethal. A 2024 psychological study from Stockholm found that men who experienced significant romantic rejection showed increased activity in brain regions associated with self-reflection and personal growth for up to 2 years after the event. The brain literally rewires itself, building new neural pathways that bypass the old addiction circuits. You're not just healing, you're evolving. But here's the delicious paradox, the thing that would make Machiavelli smile into his wine. The power her rejection gives you is precisely the power that would have made you attractive to her in the first place. The indifference you're learning? That's what she was looking for all along. The self-sufficiency crystallizing in your chest like frost? That's the cologne that drives them wild. It's cosmic comedy at its finest. You had to lose her to become someone worth keeping. Let me tell you about the Japanese art of kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold, making the repaired object more beautiful than the original. But everyone gets the metaphor wrong. They think it's about the gold, about making something pretty from damage. No, it's about the breaking. Without the shattering, there's no opportunity for transformation. The most beautiful bowls are the ones that have been dropped from the greatest heights. You want to know what rejection really is? It's her saying, "I see you clearly, and you're not enough." And that's the most honest thing anyone's ever told you, because you weren't enough, not for her, not for yourself, not for the life you claimed you wanted. You were a rough draft masquerading as a finished novel, a rehearsal pretending to be opening night. In certain Native American traditions, young men go on vision quests, alone in the wilderness, no food, no water, no comfort, until they meet their true selves. Your rejection is your vision quest. She sent you into the desert of your own soul, and you're discovering what survives when all external validation evaporates like morning dew. Here's a secret the pickup artists and dating coaches will never tell you. Rejection is a screening mechanism, and it's working perfectly. It's filtering out versions of you that weren't going to make it anyway. Every no is evolution in action, natural selection for the soul. The weak parts of you are dying, and what's left is becoming something harder, stranger, more interesting than the puppy who used to follow her around, begging for scraps of attention. There's a Turkish proverb. When the axe came into the forest, the trees said, "Look, the handle is one of us." Her rejection might feel like betrayal, but it's actually initiation. She's the axe, yes, but she's showing you that you were never meant to be a tree, standing still, rooted in need, dependent on seasons outside your control. You were meant to be the blade itself, sharp, decisive, cutting through your own illusions. So here's my question, whispered like a dare in a dark bar at 2 a.m. Can you thank her for the wounds that taught you how to bleed gold? Can you see her rejection not as abandonment, but as graduation? Can you understand that she didn't take anything from you? She revealed what was never there? Can you alchemize this lead weight in your chest into something precious, something yours, something that doesn't depend on anyone else's yes or no? Because if you can truly metabolize this rejection into wisdom, you'll discover the final joke. You'll become exactly the kind of man who doesn't get rejected anymore. Not because you're perfect, but because you're complete. Not because you're what women want, but because you want nothing from them but what they freely give. The philosopher's stone was never about turning lead to gold. It was about realizing you were never lead to begin with. Solitude isn't loneliness. It's the only honest conversation you'll ever have. At 3 a.m., when the world sleeps and you're awake counting ceiling cracks like rosary beads, you finally meet yourself. No audience, no performance, no carefully curated version of you designed to harvest likes and love. Just you and the terrifying democracy of your own thoughts. Welcome to the Monastery of One, where you are both abbot and novice, confessor and penitent, God and supplicant. I once visited a cave in Thailand where a monk had lived alone for 30 years. The walls were covered in paintings, demons, Buddhas, lovers, monsters, all drawn with charcoal made from burned offerings. "These are all me," he said, gesturing at the grotesque parade. "Every face I've worn, every fear I've fed." Solitude doesn't make you holy. It makes you honest. Most people can't bear that much truth. You think loneliness is your enemy, but loneliness is just solitude wearing a victim's mask. The real difference? Loneliness is waiting for someone to save you. Solitude is realizing you're the only savior you're getting, and that's not a tragedy. It's the beginning of everything. Nietzsche spent his most productive years alone in a boarding house, writing books that would reshape philosophy while fighting migraines that felt like God's own criticism. He wrote, "The lonely one offers his hand too quickly to anyone he meets." But what he discovered in that alpine isolation was harder. Sometimes the hand you need to grasp is your own. Here's what they don't tell you about being alone. It's addictive, not in the sad withdrawal way, but in the way morning coffee is addictive, or watching storms from a warm window. There's a quality to solitary existence that crowds dilute. a clarity, crystalline awareness that you are exactly who you are, no more, no less, no apologies. A 2025 study from Kyoto University found that men who spent at least 2 hours daily in intentional solitude, not scrolling, not drinking, just being, showed decreased cortisol levels, increased creativity, and, here's the kicker, improved relationship satisfaction when they did connect with others. Turns out, people who don't need you are infinitely more interesting than people who do. But let's talk about what solitude really feels like, shall we? It's sitting in your apartment at dusk, no lights on, watching the world turn blue-black through your window. It's cooking a meal for one and plating it beautifully, not for Instagram, but for the secret satisfaction of treating yourself like someone worth caring for. It's having full conversations with yourself and discovering you're actually pretty good company when you're not performing for anyone. The Sufis have a saying, "Be in this world, but not of it." They meant something mystical, but I'll tell you the practical translation. Learn to be alone in a crowded room and accompanied in an empty one. The monastery of one is portable. You carry it in your chest like a secret room, a place you can retreat to when the world's noise becomes unbearable. There's a man in Norway who hasn't spoken in 7 years. Not a vow of silence. He just realized one day he had nothing to say that silence couldn't say better. He makes furniture now, these impossibly delicate chairs that look like they're made of whispers. When asked why he stopped talking, he wrote on a piece of paper, "Words are for people who are afraid of being misunderstood. I'm no longer afraid." You see, when you're truly alone, not distracted alone, not drunk alone, not waiting for a text alone, but monastically, spiritually, truthfully alone, something shifts. The performative self, that exhausting puppet show you've been running since adolescence, finally closes. The audience goes home, and in that silence, you hear something you've been drowning out with noise and need, and Netflix, your actual thoughts. And God, what thoughts they are. Dark ones that slither like eels through your consciousness. Brilliant ones that flash like lightning in a summer storm. Stupid ones that make you laugh at your own absurdity. Profound ones that make you understand why hermits headed for the hills and never came back. Kierkegaard wrote, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." But he missed the crucial third part. Life can only be transformed in the present moment of solitude, where past and future collapse into the eternal now of your own company. Here's the secret that would make dating coaches bankrupt. A man who has mastered solitude doesn't pursue women. He attracts them, not because he's playing hard to get, but because he's genuinely hard to get. His attention is valuable because it's scarce. His company is intoxicating because he doesn't need yours. He's the monastery that others want to visit, not because the door is closed, but because when it opens, something real lives inside. The ancient Greeks had a word, autarkeia. Self-sufficiency, not the survivalist kind where you hoard canned goods and ammunition, but the spiritual kind where you hoard nothing because you need nothing beyond what you can provide yourself. Meaning, purpose, direction, validation, love. So here's my challenge to you, delivered like a prescription for a disease you didn't know was killing you. Can you spend 1 week, just 7 days, without seeking any external validation? No dating apps, no social media, no texts fishing for compliments, no conversations designed to make someone like you. Just you, your thoughts, and the terrifying freedom of not needing anyone's approval. Can you sit in your own presence like it's a cathedral, not a prison? Can you make friends with the silence that other men fill with desperation? Because in that silence, in that self-imposed exile from the economy of attention, you'll discover something that will change everything. You are already whole. You were born complete. Everything else, every relationship, every achievement, every momentary connection, is just decoration on an already perfect structure. The monastery of one isn't about becoming a hermit. It's about becoming a man who chooses connection rather than needs it, who enters relationships as a luxury, not a necessity, who loves from overflow rather than deficit. And when you master that, when you truly become the abbot of your own existence, The world will beat a path to your door, not because you're playing games, but because you've stopped playing altogether. Her ghost takes up more space than her body ever did. In the Museum of Broken Relationships in Zagreb, there's a set of keys. The placard reads, "These unlocked a door I never stopped walking through, long after the locks were changed." That's the thing about absence. It has architecture. It builds rooms in your mind, hallways that lead nowhere, staircases that ascend to floors that don't exist. You've become an architect of emptiness, haven't you? A master builder of negative space. I'll tell you something that will sound like madness until it doesn't. Her absence has more presence than most people's presence. It sits across from you at dinner, leaves imprints on pillows, takes up 2/3 of every photograph you're in. Physicists talk about dark matter, the invisible mass that holds galaxies together. She's your dark matter, exerting gravitational pull on every thought, bending light around the void where she used to be. The Japanese have a concept, ma, the pregnant emptiness between things, the pause between notes that makes music possible. But your ma has become malignant. It's not the healthy space between breaths. It's the suffocating vacuum that makes you gasp. Last winter, I met a man who kept his dead wife's coffee cup on the kitchen table for 17 years. Same spot, same angle. He'd wash it every week, place it back precisely. "The cup isn't the problem," he told me. "The problem is the space around the cup. The problem is the hand that doesn't reach for it anymore." He finally threw it away the day he realized he'd forgotten what her fingers looked like wrapped around the handle. The absence had eaten even his memories. Here's what Schopenhauer knew that self-help gurus don't. Absence isn't the opposite of presence. It's presence inverted, turned inside out like a glove, fitting differently, but still shaped by what it once contained. You don't miss her. You miss the you that existed when she was there. You're homesick for a version of yourself that died when she left. A 2024 neuroscience study from Montreal found something delicious. The brain processes absence in the same regions that detect physical pain. Your body literally hurts from the architecture of not having. You're not imagining the weight on your chest, the tightness in your throat. Your nervous system is responding to amputation, the phantom limb syndrome of love. But here's where it gets interesting, where Machiavelli would lean forward with that reptilian smile. Absence is power, but only if you're the architect, not the blueprint. Watch how master chess players use empty squares. They're not just moving pieces, they're sculpting vacancy, creating threats from nothing. The most dangerous piece on the board is often the one that isn't there yet. The potential move that forces your opponent to defend against ghosts. You've been playing checkers while she's been playing chess. She understood something you're only now learning. Absence is a weapon, presence is a gift, and most people waste both. Let me paint you a scene. A woman in Prague keeps an empty picture frame on her mantle. When guests ask about it, she says, "That's for the love I haven't met yet. I'm practicing missing him now, so when he arrives, I'll know how precious presence is." She's been married 3 times. Each husband competed with that empty frame, tried to fill it. The frame remains empty. The husbands remain X. There's a Danish word, hygge, that cozy, candlelit contentment everyone's always chasing. But there's another word they don't export, uhygge, the uncanny, unsettling opposite. That's what her absence creates. Your life has become uhyggelig, haunted by the negative space, the anti-comfort of missing. You know what's truly grotesque? You're more intimate with her absence than you ever were with her presence. You've studied the void she left with the dedication of a Talmudic scholar, memorizing every shadow, every echo, every place where she isn't. You know more about the shape of her absence than you ever knew about the shape of her soul. The mystics talk about the via negativa, knowing God by what God isn't. You've become a mystic of missing, defining everything by what it lacks. This coffee shop isn't where you met her. This song isn't your song. This Friday night isn't when she'd stay over. Your entire existence has become a photographic negative, all reversed values and inverted meaning. But I'll tell you a secret that might just save you. Nature abhors a vacuum, but consciousness abhors it more. The architecture of absence you've built. It's not permanent. It's not even solid. It's like those impossible staircases in Escher paintings. They only work from one perspective. Shift your position, and the illusion collapses. A Zen master once told me, "The finger pointing at the moon is not the moon, but people spend their lives worshiping fingers. Your pain is pointing at something, not at her. She's gone, evaporated, moved on to build new architectures with someone who probably texts back. It's pointing at the space in you that thinks it needs another person to be complete. So here's my question, carved in the doorframe of your emptiness. What if you stopped being the curator of her absence and became the architect of your own presence? What if you filled those empty rooms with something other than echoes? What if you recognized that the space she left isn't a her-shaped hole, but a you-shaped opportunity? What if absence isn't something that happens to you, but something you can wield, like a blade that cuts both ways? Because here's the final mindfuck, the last laugh in this cosmic joke. The only way to truly honor someone's absence is to make it irrelevant. To become so present, so architecturally sound in your own existence, that the empty spaces become design features, not structural failures. The architecture of absence only has the power you give it, and you, my friend, have been far too generous. The sweetest fruit grows in the garden you stopped watering. And here we are. At the end, that's really a beginning. At the death, that's really a birth. Let me tell you about the most dangerous thing a man can become: complete. There's a monastery in Tibet where monks practice something called chöd, literally cutting through. They go to charnel grounds at night, surrounded by corpses and vultures, and invite their demons to devour them. Not metaphorically. They visualize their own dismemberment, offering their flesh to hungry ghosts until there's nothing left but consciousness observing its own dissolution. The ones who survive this practice, they come back changed. They've died to fear by feeding it everything it wanted until it choked on abundance. You're about to learn the same lesson, but your charnel ground is the graveyard of giving a fuck. I knew a man once, a painter who'd spent decades trying to be famous, creating what he thought galleries wanted, what critics might praise. His apartment was crammed with canvases of calculated beauty, each one a prayer for recognition that went unanswered. Then his mother died. Something in him snapped. Not broke, but snapped into place. He burned every painting in a bonfire that made his neighbors call the fire department. When they asked what he was doing, he said, "Making room." The next morning, he started painting with house paint on cardboard boxes. Ugly things, honest things, things that looked like wounds with colors. He gave them away to homeless people, left them in subway stations, threw them in dumpsters. 6 months later, a collector found one, tracked him down. He's in the Whitney now. But here's the thing, he still doesn't care. He still paints on trash. Success found him the moment he stopped chasing it. Nietzsche called it amor fati, love of fate. But that's too romantic. What you're approaching is darker, more liberating. Nihil fati, nothing of fate. The recognition that caring was always optional, that your suffering was a choice you made every morning, like choosing which knife to stab yourself with. Here's what the Stoics knew that Instagram philosophers fear. Indifference isn't depression, it's freedom. The paradise of not caring isn't a wasteland. It's a garden where everything grows wild because you've stopped pruning it to please anyone else. A 2025 psychological study from Berlin called it radical acceptance through systematic divestment. Fancy words for stop watering dead plants. The subjects who reported the highest life satisfaction weren't the ones who found new love or achieved their goals. They were the ones who stopped needing those things to happen. They divested from outcomes like billionaires dumping toxic stock. You want to know what not caring really looks like? It's not cynicism. That's just caring wrapped in barbed wire. It's not nihilism. That's caring about nothing as desperately as you once cared about everything. True not caring is lighter than air. It's laughing at your own jokes alone in your apartment. It's wearing the shirt she hated because you actually like it. It's deleting your dating apps not from heartbreak, but from boredom. It's the moment you realize you haven't thought about her in 3 days. And that fact doesn't make you sad. It makes you curious about what else you haven't been thinking about. The Taoists have a phrase, wu wei, action without effort, doing by not doing. But they buried the lead. It's not about being passive. It's about aligning so perfectly with what is, that forcing things becomes impossible. You can't push the river, but you can stop trying and discover you are always the current. Let me tell you about the most powerful man I ever met. He ran a food cart in Bangkok, selling soup to office workers. When I asked about his dreams, he looked at me like I'd asked about his fins. "I make soup," he said. "People eat it. Sometimes they smile. That's it. No 5-year plan, no vision board, no side hustle to become the next soup empire." He'd achieved something rarer than success. He'd achieved completion. Every bowl of soup was a perfect circle, beginning and ending with itself. But you're still out here building cathedrals to care, aren't you? Every time you check if she viewed your story, you're adding another stone. Every imaginary conversation where you finally say the thing that makes her understand, another flying buttress. You're architect and worshiper at the church of giving too many fucks, and the congregation is just you, alone, singing hymns to no one. Here's the secret that would collapse the entire self-help industry. You don't need to be better. You don't need to be more. You don't need to be anything other than what you are right now. Reading this, breathing, existing. The paradise of not caring isn't about becoming someone else. It's about stopping the exhausting performance of trying to be someone worth caring about. Schopenhauer wrote, "A man can do what he wants, but not want what he wants." But I'll go further. A man can stop wanting what he wants. He can reach the place where desire itself becomes optional, where the whole machinery of need and satisfaction reveals itself as a game he can simply stop playing. So here's my final question, my last serpent's whisper in your ear. What would you do tomorrow if you knew, really knew, that nothing you did mattered to anyone but you? Would you still pursue her? Would you still craft the perfect text? Would you still perform the elaborate dance of modern romance, all those calculated vulnerabilities and strategic mysteries? Or would you wake up, make coffee, and realize that the paradise you've been seeking was always here, hidden beneath the thick underbrush of caring what anyone thinks? Because here's the cosmic punchline, the last laugh of the gods. The moment you stop caring is the moment everything you wanted starts chasing you. But by then, you won't even notice. You'll be too busy living your actual life, the one that was always waiting underneath all that effort. The paradise of not caring isn't a destination. It's what's left when you stop traveling. It's home. It's you, stripped of performance, pretense, and the exhausting need to be needed. Welcome to the garden. Notice how everything grows better without you trying so hard? Notice how the flowers don't care if you admire them? Notice how the sun rises without your permission? That's you now. Or it could be, if you just stopped. The Divine Comedy was never about getting the girl. It was about realizing you were always the main character, the love interest, the plot twist, and the happy ending. You were always paradise. You just couldn't see it through all that caring. But now you can.